Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, June 26th, and you are on The Take. My name is Todd Hirsch. I am the regular host of The Take. This is a live LinkedIn live show we do every Friday morning where we break down the economic and geopolitical events of the week and really try to focus on what it means for the average person. What does it mean for you and me? Because a lot of these topics, they can get a little bit lost in the news and a little bit confusing. So every week we try to break it down and give you our take on what it means for you. For all of those who are watching live, just a reminder, we love comments and questions during the show. You can go right into the chat and put your comments and questions in. And if she's ready, I'm going to be joined by my regular co-host, Gitane De Silva. She's in the background somewhere waiting, I think. There she is. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired. It's been a busy week. I'm glad it's Friday.
Give us a little sense. Were you traveling? I know you do a lot. You and I both do a lot of speaking, but were you traveling this week on the road?
I was in New Brunswick, actually. I'm on the board of New Brunswick Power. So I was in Fredericton, and beautiful spot, just hard to get to. There was a lot of flight delays, but
wow.
Be home again.
New Brunswick is one of two provinces I'm embarrassed to admit that I've never yet set foot in.
Oh,
that
really?
is going to change very soon.
I've been everywhere except for Nunavut. That's the only place.
Nunavut, yeah, I haven't. I've been to the other two territories, but Nunavut is sort of the crown jewel, right? I mean, it's not on the way anywhere. You really have to plan to get up there, but I hope to get up there one day.
Me too.
Soon. All right, let's get into the events of the week. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is a theme that we have been covering over the last 10 weeks. It's starting to feel a little dated, but it's still in the news, and that is the tensions in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices. Now, we saw even just today that there was a shot or a hit on a Singapore tanker, I think it was. And now the strait is closed again. I don't know. Gitane, give me your take. Is this ever going to really get back to normal, or is this constant disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, is this what we can expect now?
Well, I think it's going to take a while for trust to develop that the ceasefire is actually genuine and is going to hold. I mean, you've got the added complication of it's not just a war between two parties and not just a war in one country, right? So you've got the U.S. actions in Iran, Israel and Iran, and then Israel and Lebanon, and a fight against Hezbollah. And so that is making it a bit tricky to make the ceasefire stick. And so I think we're just going to see this volatility for a little while, because even the MOU that was signed between Iran and the United States, Israel did not sign that. There's still some issues that were punted down the road, like Iran's nuclear program. So there's still some pretty big hurdles to be cleared before we can genuinely say that there's going to be a lasting ceasefire, hopefully a lasting peace.
Yeah, it doesn't even feel like a truce, really, does it? It just sort of feels like we're suspending this because we need to get oil prices back. And they did fall this week. I think they hit as low as 70. The West Texas Intermediate Brent's always a little higher. But prices did fall back down to sort of close to pre-war levels. Sounds like they're maybe up a little bit again today, but I think we're just going to have to anticipate volatility in that oil price, which does not work really in favor of anyone. But even here in Alberta, where the provincial government derives so much revenue from oil and gas royalties, trying to estimate what kind of revenue they're going to be dealing with this sort of volatility is a real challenge.
Absolutely. But interestingly, the price of gas jumped again yesterday.
Yeah, that's I mean, I would love someone to really explain to me why it is when oil prices shoot higher, within hours, gasoline prices jump in unison with that. But when oil prices drop, it's like, oh, well, no, it's a complicated, we're still dealing with oil that costs more and prices. It really doesn't seem to be correlated on the way down.
Well, like most things, prices are much quicker to go up than they are to come back down, right?
Yeah. But it would be nice if, for motorists anyway, if those gasoline prices. It is funny though. I was up in Edmonton this week and seeing gas at 142. It seemed, maybe this is just a sign at the time that $1.42 for a liter of gas seemed like, wow, that's really cheap. But
yeah, it certainly feels that way. And I think it was $1.48 when I left here earlier this week, and then it was $1.60 something last night. My Uber driver said it went up because it's Friday, so maybe that's the only reason.
well, or we're heading into a summer travel time too.
Very true.
So just before we leave that, anything else on the geopolitics of the Middle East?
Well, I think people just have to remember that in addition to waiting for some type of lasting truce, ceasefire agreement that actually holds, you then are going to have to repair all the infrastructure that was damaged in this conflict, right? And that's going to take some time. So they've got to repair transportation, refining, production. There was that big natural gas field that was hit that's going to take, they said, 3 to 5 years to rebuild. So this is a longer term scenario. And of course, it's quicker to turn the taps off than it is to turn them back on. So we just need to be mindful of that too. They've got to check everything, make sure it's safe, get those flows back up. They've got to get the vessels in there to load them up. So this fall, even if we get a lasting agreement, it is going to take, at least 2 to 3 weeks to start what is moving again. And then, months and years to get all that production back aligned and back into markets. So we have to see what that's going to mean for global markets and consumption and how things are going to shift.
One of the theories, or one of the ideas when this whole war broke out, is that this is actually going to accelerate investment in renewable, non-carbon based energy. Have we seen any evidence so far? Have we seen countries ramping up in their investments in wind, solar, geothermal, or is it still a little too soon? I mean, it's only been 3 or 4 months, I guess, but
we've seen a shift. EV purchases are up, electric vehicle purchases are up in many countries. I think people are frustrated with, not only the price, but in some countries they're rationing, right? And so the shift to electricity, I think people feel like they have greater control over that. At the same time, we've also seen a return to coal. Even before the war broke out, coal numbers are creeping back up again, because it's it's an accessible fuel source. You don't have the same geopolitical challenges with it. It's a very reliable base load. So we've sort of seen this split, I guess, this dichotomy of a return to coal, which of course is not great from an emissions or other pollution perspective. And then you're also seeing some pivot to renewables. So I think for a lot of people, they're waiting to see, as always, what the outcome is going to be. But I think regardless, as we look to electrify the economy, we're going to increasingly need an all of the above energy scenario, right? If you look at all those projections, the amount of electricity required, those numbers are staggering. And so we're going to have to do all the things: solar, wind, natural gas, geothermal, combined cycle, all of the things.
Yeah. And that's always sort of how I viewed it, is that there's not going to be one silver bullet on moving away or adding to, I guess, petroleum, oil and gas. But do we see, is it mostly in China, India, those really large economies where we're seeing some of that uptake in EVs, or?
No, it's been broader. So certainly, China has a huge EV market already, but we've seen some numbers go up in Europe. And then the other thing we've seen is in countries like India that are very dependent on cooking oil, that people are shifting to an electric cooktop, right? Okay. And so that, has the potential to really impact that market, the people that can afford it, because they don't want to encounter these types of shortages. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I know there's lots of analysts out there that are speculating, but I think we need to give it a few more months to see really if these shifts are permanent. And then, do governments then lean in as well on the EV side? It's great to see people want to buy more, but then, there's going to need to be support for the infrastructure that goes with it, the charging stations and all the electrical system that would support that usage.
Yeah. And I was just reminded when Peter, our tech guy in the background, he put up a little ticker reminding viewers and listeners that you have been recently appointed as the executive director at the School for Democracy. Is that, am I getting
Politics and Democracy? Yeah.
Politics and Democracy. Now, we announced this a couple of weeks ago on the week that this was made public. Have you started anything yet, or when does the role actually begin?
I officially start next week, July the 1st.
Next week, yeah. July 1st. That's exciting. Are you going to be up in Edmonton for any kind of kickoff of the center?
I'll spend my first 10 days on the job here in Calgary at all the Stampede events because it's such a good opportunity to raise the school's profile, and then I'll head up the week after that. And get up to speed, meet all the people, and really start to really launch the school and all its efforts. There's lots of work to be done in terms of politics and democracy these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can't wait for that to kick off, and hearing about how it progresses when we regroup after a bit of a recess here in the summer. But I want to get on to our second topic, and that is another theme that has been recurring over the last several weeks. It never really goes away, but this week is an important week. This is the week that the CUSMA review or renegotiation, depending on if you're Canadian or American, the trade deal between Canada and the United States and Mexico. July 1st is the deadline at which point the governments have to decide, are we going to renew it or are we going to put it on an every year cycle renew? Is that correct?
Well, there's three options come July 1st. So you need to either indicate you want to renew it or extend it for another 16 years. Right now it's good till 2036. You want to propose amendments, or you want to withdraw on 6 months' notice. And if the three parties cannot agree to one of those three, then you're subject to an annual review until all the parties can agree how they want to treat the agreement going forward.
So it's a kick the can down the road.
A Groundhog Day scenario, I call it.
So we might be locked into this CUSMA, never knowing from 1 minute to the next what, particularly, I mean, let's be honest about it. It really is the White House and Donald Trump who is being difficult, I guess, or challenging, not wanting to renew it, signaling that he's going to cancel the whole thing, but not really playing his cards too much. Obviously, Canada, much keener to lock down an agreement. But I think the Prime Minister has been pretty clear. We're not going to just accept any agreement. We're going to accept an agreement that is the best agreement that Canada can achieve. How do you think this is going to go? Is there anything going to happen July 1st, or is it going to be option 3, let's kick the can down the road and review in a year?
Well, July 1st is just a date in the agreement, but actually nothing changes to the current situation if we can't reach agreement by then.
Okay.
All that means is that the uncertainty continues, which, as you would know, is bad for investment. But otherwise, the agreement remains in effect. Even if President Trump says he doesn't want to renew it, it's still in effect till 2036, unless he says he's going to withdraw the U.S. And I think that's very unlikely before the U.S. midterms, as we're hearing more voices on the American side say they want this agreement to continue. So, I think we just, for reasons of investment certainty, it would be great to have clarity. Those sectoral tariffs that we're seeing, steel, aluminum, autos, copper, lumber, those are outside of the agreement, right? Those are not CUSMA provisions that are being applied. So really this review of the agreement, that's one thing that Canada's going to be pushing for. We don't want to sign onto a new agreement unless we can get those tariffs lifted. The Americans have no desire to lift those tariffs. So I think you're right that we won't sign on to a new agreement because we know, I think, that the agreement we have is probably the best one that we're going to get. So I think our hope would be to continue the current agreement for as long as possible, while still trying to address those sectoral tariffs, which is really tricky. And we're seeing big regional impacts, right? Bigger impacts in other parts of Canada that we're seeing here in Alberta.
Yeah. And it's a bit of an unusual, a lot of times when Alberta, Western Canada, when there's been an oil price slump, it tends to be very regionally focused in this part of the country. Now we are seeing these sectoral tariffs punishing mostly Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, I guess, in the case of lumber. My read on it is, Alberta, Saskatchewan are probably the least affected by these sectoral impacts. But it doesn't really, for me, take away the urgency of trying to deal with this. Because even though it is regional, this is still a national issue. It's going to be fewer revenue dollars for the federal government from businesses that are being affected, their income, business income is going to be hit, and also an obligation on Ottawa, as I think is appropriate, to offer some support and assistance for those industries, those regions that are getting hit hard. We would expect that here in Western Canada, if there were situations specific to our economy. So it's still a big problem. I don't know. Do you think we're going to see any movement, or are we kind of like the Strait of Hormuz? Are we kind of locked into this for the long game?
Well, I mean, I think you're right that this is very much a decision that we made in the White House by one person. And so it depends on, how he's feeling on any given day, who he's spoken with, and, how Canada and Mexico can package their position so that it feels like the president has won, right? There's a lot of psychology involved in this negotiation. And so, what is it that we can do? I mean, we know what we're doing that irritates the United States. And then it's a question of how much we're willing to move on those issues. And then, we have to contemplate some bigger issues, like, would we be comfortable moving to more of a customs union from the free trade agreement? Would we be comfortable going back to having a bilateral free trade agreement with the US and then having a bilateral with Mexico as opposed to a trilateral? I mean, there's some pretty fundamental questions there that we have to contemplate, in addition to, what are we going to do about dairy? What are we going to do about softwood lumber? All these kinds of things.
Yeah. Dairy is the one that has been a constant irritant, and not just for President Trump, but for most presidents prior to Trump, and actually around the world. I wanted to get into this with Martha Hall Finley, who's done a lot of work on supply management and has some very specific thoughts on supply management. And I might have her back as a guest maybe in the fall. But what do you think? Is supply management in dairy, the Prime Minister has said we're not touching it, but our practical reality is going to get in the way? And might we see some dismantling of that, or at least some give on that?
Well, I would just point out that every single country in the world protects some part of its agriculture sector. So we are known for dairy, but the Americans are known for corn and sugar, right? They have parts of their agriculture supply chain that they intensely.
Europe protects a lot of their agriculture. Yeah.
Right. And then Europe has all those special labeling requirements, right? It's only Champagne if it's from the Champagne region of France, right? So all those kinds of things. I think the challenge with dairy in Canada is it's political, right? It is very much the majority of the dairy quotas are held in Ontario and mostly in Quebec. And it's a very political issue in Quebec. And we know that you can not win a majority in the Canadian Parliament without substantial seats in Quebec, whereas you can win a majority without substantial seats in Alberta or Saskatchewan. And so that is part of the challenge. We know that from a revenue perspective, economically, that, for example, beef and canola are more important to the Canadian economy writ large, and certainly to our market diversification strategy than dairy. But it is a very politically sensitive issue. And so, it would take something like, sort of the threat of the CUSMA going away, I think, for the government to engage on that issue. And it's interesting, right? We got rid of the wheat board. We got rid of a whole bunch of other similar mechanisms, but dairy remains. And yet this government has also said, that they will not give on it. They're going to protect it at all costs. So we have to see. I mean, I think there's ways around it. It's going to be really geeky to try and explain it here, so I won't. But you could look at, sure, you give on dairy and then hold the Americans to the Canadian standards, right? We have very different regulatory standards when it comes to dairy. So, we could look at it creatively, and I think there might be a way to still protect our industry while giving the Americans on paper what they want, but I'm not sure that they would like that.
And I'm really out of my depth real quickly when it comes to the dairy industry, and I'm sure any supporter of supply management would fight me on this, but isn't the possibility out there that sort of like the Canadian wine industry, which everyone said is going to be dead in 10 minutes if we engage in free trade with the United States, because BC and Ontario wineries are just not competitive with California, they're going to be gone. 40 years later, they are stronger than ever. They've been able to improve. I think it's fair to say prior to free trade with the United States, Canadian wine wasn't really very good. You could make a sangria, and that's probably about all you want to do with that. But now it's actually really good. Isn't there a similar story that is possible with Canadian dairy, maybe. And the same thing you could say with the wheat board. A lot of people said Canadian wheat farmers are going to be doomed without the wheat board. I remember that whole debate going on, and here we are. And Canadian wheat farmers are doing better than ever. Isn't there a similar story, or is the situation just too different with supply management, and comparisons to wine and wheat are not the same?
I think the challenge on the dairy side is the Americans way overproduce milk, like way overproduce milk. And so they're looking for a market for milk in particular. Milk and sort of the cheap mozzarella that you use on a like more affordable kind of pizza, right? Like if you get a fast food pizza. So that's where the real irritant is. So the concern on the Canadian side is if you let the Americans have access to the market, they will flood the Canadian market with cheap dairy. But the reality is we have different regulatory standards in Canada when it comes to how dairy herds are, how they're raised, the hormones and antibiotics that can be used on the herd, and then some other differences. And so I think that would be the way to go about it is, there was quite a debate in Canada. This is like a super geeky conversation, but there's quite a debate in Canada probably 15, 20 years ago about a particular hormone that the Americans use in their dairy industry. And we decided we did not want that here. And so I think that would be sort of the competitive advantage as you market it. Like, people, they'll pay extra for organic, or they'll pay extra for, sort of farm to table. I think that there is potential there for the
Canadian. And then Canadian dairy becomes a premium product for American consumers who will pay more for it. I would say, when they introduced, I don't know when this would have been, but like processed cheese slices, actually Velveeta, Velveeta, it goes back, I did a bit of research, it goes back to 1918.
My goodness.
I know. I thought it was a much more 60s, 70s kind of thing, but no, it's been around a while. But everyone understands a processed cheese slice is not the same product as a fine piece of brie or, Gouda. There's a market for each. People aren't confused by it. The introduction of processed cheese did not eliminate fine cheeses. In fact, it might have even separated the market and made the market for strong cheeses even better. So I don't know, maybe we might see something like that with Canadian dairy. But I want to get on to the last topic because time is running out. The last topic is something we've touched on a few times, but there was a big announcement this week. This has to do with the Major Projects Office of the federal government, and an announcement this week that 3 of those projects are now green-lighted to go ahead. They're all kind of based in northern Canada. One of them is a road through quite a long highway through the Northwest Territories that is making a lot of northern communities and industries year-round accessible. Another is a deep water port in Nunavut, and also some road access. And then the third is a nuclear waste facility in northern Ontario. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So is this
geological repository? Yeah.
Yeah, in Ingus, Ontario?
Ignace, yeah.
Yeah. So is this good news? I mean, we've seen a lot of criticism of the Major Projects Office. It's been around now for a little more than a year. People saying it's just a lot of bureaucracy and nothing's going to happen. But now we are actually seeing some movement, or are we?
Well, we are, because I think if I remember, these 3 projects have actually been declared projects of national interest.
Yeah.
Right. So they are the first. So we've had 17 projects referred to the Major Projects Office for review and assessment. But these 3 projects have actually been designated, which means the government can use its powers under Bill C5 to exempt these projects from certain pieces of federal legislation. So I think it is important that we have projects that have reached this bar. So hopefully now we understand where the cutoff is, what the criteria are to be considered a project of national interest. And I think it's smart as well to go forward with projects like the deep geological repository, the nuclear waste facility. A ton of work has already been done there in terms of community engagement and acceptance. And so, the nature of that project, it's essentially a mine is what they're building. Like they're digging a big hole in the ground.
Right in the Canadian Shield, isn't it?
Right. So we know that mines in Canada right now take a very long time to build, 15 to 20 years to build a mine in Canada. And so I think there is some strategy there in choosing a mine where they've already got, like it's being built both near a community and a First Nation, and the First Nation and the community have both voted in favor of this project. So you've got that local support. So I think it's important to demonstrate that we can expedite that mining approval process. And then in the north too, having these roads, again, these are projects with a lot of support. The port will be more complicated. And we all know that the first time anybody goes through a process, there's going to be hiccups, right? It's like your first pancake, it's all a little bit wonky. So I think going forward with a road, while complex, is not as complex as a pipeline, as a port, as new rail, as an LNG facility. And so I think the opportunity to sort of work the kinks out of the process with something like a road, which has been debated and discussed and studied for forever, decades, also I think was a strategic move. What do you think?
Well, I was interested in the one, I was interested in all three of them, but the road through the NWT, like you said, probably the easiest one to get going from an engineering perspective, probably the most straightforward. But, already there's pushback saying, well, we're not pushback from environmental concerns. What is this going to mean for caribou migration patterns? And are we moving too fast on this? And, I'm probably, like a lot of Canadians, I'm of two minds on this. Understandably, we do need to get going on these projects, and we can't allow years and years and decades of delay. But I don't know. Some of those things, are we fast tracking through? To be honest, it's mostly the environmental policies, isn't it? Like when we think about what would normally be roadblocks, the environmental assessments, which can take a long, long time to figure out, and require all sorts of redesign and rerouting of different things. So I don't know. I'm encouraged that things are moving forward. I was also encouraged this week, article in the Globe and Mail actually this morning, showing, talking about BC Premier David Eby and the Prime Minister, and looking at some major projects in British Columbia, and also a pipeline from Alberta. And David Eby is sounding now a little more conciliatory. I don't know if that's the right word, but less insistent on pushing back. I think we might see, maybe over the summer, maybe over Stampede, some positive announcements from the Prime Minister and the Premier, which then, I mean, if we had another half hour, we could get into what if there is an announcement on a pipeline from Alberta to the West Coast and David Eby is willing to play along. What does that do then over the summer for the referendum campaign on separation? Probably if you're a hardcore separatist, it doesn't matter. But for a lot of those sort of squishy ones in the middle that are like frustrated, they might be encouraged to say, well, maybe this time it is different.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, just going back to the environmental question for a minute, it is just to remind people that part of the purpose of the Major Projects Office is one project, one review. So they're not necessarily lowering the standard for the environment. They are only going to have either a federal, provincial, or territorial review as opposed to having two. So that is a way to shorten the process a lot. And then they will have to make some hard decisions, right? Are you going to impact a local, I don't know, hummingbird population in order to, like, that's always the challenge with big projects. And I think you're right on the Alberta pipeline front. I mean, it's obviously a very hot topic here at the moment. And so we'll see. The province has said they would be submitting their application by July the 1st. The clock is ticking. We've heard as early as today or Monday even. So really curious to see what's in it, who they've got. Do they have a proponent? Which Indigenous?
Well, that was my question when I read that Globe article. It sounds like some sort of announcement is imminent, but I don't know, I'm not in those circles, but is there a private sector player who is now willing to step up? Maybe this has all been kept under wraps, and maybe immediately after the parade, the Stampede parade, at first flip or something, I don't know, all these crazy Stampede events, maybe the Prime Minister and the Premier will announce something and sing Kumbaya. I don't know. I mean, it could be a wild Stampede that way.
For sure. Well, we know he's coming to town, so we'll see next week.
He is coming to town. We got about a minute left. Very quickly, what do you think are going to be the big stories over the summer?
I think the Kuzma review for sure, because that, we're not going to have an agreement by July the 1st. So I think that's one that's going to continue on. And then likely this whole separation debate here in Alberta as we ramp up to the fall. We've got that referendum in October. We're not hearing much about the other referendum questions, but certainly that whole conversation around the future of Alberta with Canada and what that looks like, I think.
And then there's also an election imminent in Quebec around the same time, isn't it? Late October.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an exciting summer and into the fall. We are taking a break actually on the take. We'll be off for probably at least the month of July, but so everyone will have a chance to recharge and recuperate. And we will be back late July, early August. We'll, of course, let everyone know on LinkedIn. So keep your eyes peeled for things coming up. Also, check out Gitane's website and my website. Just a little pitch if anyone is looking for speakers for their events in the fall, your conferences, your board of directors retreats, your senior team leader meetings, let us know. We would love to be able to contribute some of our perspectives on economics and geopolitics. But with that, Gitane, we are a minute over. Thank you so much for joining me as my regular co-host. I know schedulers are busy and you're not always able to make it, but you've been here for most of them. I really appreciate everything that you do and all of the insights and wisdom that you provide.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. I always enjoy our conversations.
We will be talking to you probably over Stampede, and then we'll be back on the take in about a month or so. And thank you to Peter Clark in the background who keeps us looking good and everything running smoothly. Peter, we really appreciate you. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great summer.
Have a great summer.